Hello everyone, welcome to Reactify Labs. Today we will understand the difference between forward proxy and reverse proxy. I know this is very confusing to remember what forward proxy is and what reverse proxy is. I'm not sure about you guys, but I get confused a lot. So I have found a way to uh, memorize this or to be able to recall it whenever I need. So basically, forward proxy just forwards the request. This is how I remember it. So if the request is being forwarded, it means it's a forward proxy. If not, then it's a reverse proxy. I know this does not explain a lot, but let me give you an example how to explain this. So let's say this is your mobile phone or your computer, and you are in a maybe your school network or office network. So school network or office network, you are connected to the Wi-Fi basically. So what happens is there are some sites which are usually banned in the office network. For example, maybe if you are working, maybe you don't have access to Facebook, or you don't have access to some uh, mm, what do I say that? What is the word for that? Those vulgar sites, maybe, right? So in that case, what happens is whatever request you make to the network, let's say you do some searching that something xyz.com, and this is some restricted site, maybe it's something vulgar or it's related to some social media, maybe Netflix, but you are trying to access it during your office hours or from your office computer while connected to the office internet, office Wi-Fi, office VPN. Then in that case, what happens is your device requests for this domain, but what happens is the request, when it leaves from your device, it goes to a proxy. Okay, and in this proxy what happens is this proxy checks if the link that you have provided, the URL that you have provided, is that allowed or not. And when proxy sees that okay, this is not allowed, it will reject your request. It will just give you that you are not allowed to access that. So this is forward proxy. Even though you are making the request, the proxy is making the request on your behalf and then telling you that see, you cannot access that because that's not allowed. This is what forward proxy does. Forward proxy is basically blocking your request. Your request comes, it's getting filtered by the proxy, and that's how they control and monitor the internet usage by the employees or the students. Other very good example of forward proxy can be VPNs. So maybe let's say you are in India, okay, or maybe you are in US, okay, and you have Prime Video. So if you know, Prime Video of US and India are different. There are some content which is not allowed for Indian consumers. There are some content which are not allowed for US consumers. So let's say you are currently in US and you are trying to access Prime Video, but you want to watch something which is not available in US but is available in India Prime Video. So in that case, what happens is maybe you connect to VPN, okay, VPN of India. Although Amazon recognize that you are using VPN and it will not let you do that, but for the sake of this example, let's assume that you are allowed to do that. So what happens is in that case, your IP address shows that you are from India now. So now when you go to Prime Video, it will show you the India content. Or any other website, video site, it will show you India content. So what's happening basically? Even though your phone or your laptop is in US, it goes through a proxy which is the VPN. This is the forward proxy. And this VPN now changes your IP address to show it's from India and then directs you to this Prime Video, so that when this Prime Video sees that okay, the IP address that has come is not from US, it's from India. So it allows that content, that okay, you can see it now. So this VPN is also another example of forward proxy. It basically, forward proxy, what it basically does is it hides the client. So client hiding is done by forward proxy. Who is the original client? Nobody knows. So basically it's forwarding the request. And then what's reverse proxy? So in reverse proxy, what happens is this time the server is hidden. Earlier the client was hidden, now the server gets hidden. So what happens is, let's say again you have this phone or your computer, you are trying to make some request to the internet. Maybe let's say you are trying to go to some shopping site, amazon.com. So in that case, there is a actually amazon.com. There is a proxy which sits between Amazon server and you basically, and this is for Amazon server. This is to protect Amazon server, not you. If it was here to protect you or hide your identity, it would be a forward proxy, but this is actually to save Amazon. So what happens is your request goes to this proxy, and then this proxy redirects it to Amazon server. Why? Because it has a lot of benefits, including load balancing. Maybe there are multiple servers. So which server should the request go to? So this is the job of the proxy, that okay, it will say that okay, go to this server or go to this server. So depending on which server it sends it to, the request will come or the response will come from that server. So that's the job of a reverse proxy. It protects the server. It does not let you know which server is serving your request. You will just realize that okay, you are getting served and you are getting served from the proxy, but the request is getting served by the server to the proxy, and then proxy serves it back to you. So again, the server gets hidden, right? Similarly, again, if we take another example, maybe Prime Video or Netflix. So if you have to watch something, so usually, or if you have not watched the video of CDN, please go and watch that to get an idea of what CDN is. So your request, although it is meant for netflix.com, it goes to the CDN. So what CDN does is, if Netflix server, let's say, is in US and you are requesting from India, the time to travel the data would be too much and your experience would be not good. So that's why what happens is CDN serves your request. CDN is what, maybe India CDN or closest to your region, whatever CDN is, that CDN serves your request. So again, this CDN acts as the reverse proxy for Netflix. It saves the Netflix, or it basically gives users a good experience. The users of Netflix gets a good experience because of the CDN, and users will never know that it's not Netflix which is serving the request, it's the CDN that is serving the request, right? So again, that's why this CDN acts as the reverse proxy, because it is saving the server. Okay, so to reiterate, forward proxy forwards the request, forwards the client's request, masks the client, and reverse proxy basically reverses the role. Instead of the request serving done by server, the proxy serves the request and thus saves the server basically. So this was all about forward proxy and this reverse proxy in brief, or using a real life system so that it's easy to understand and it's difficult to forget ever. So now that we know what forward proxy is and what backward proxy or reverse proxy is, and we can relate it, let's understand some of the technicalities of it. So first, let's see what are proxies basically. We have said a lot about forward proxy, reverse proxy, but what is proxy? Proxy is the same thing which you did in your schools or colleges. There was a teacher, there were students, there were only, let's say, 40 students in the class, but when teacher started taking attendance, the attendance sheet had 100 presents. How? So these 40 students acted as the proxy of other 60 students. So that's what we tell our friends, right? Please give my proxy, right? So that's what it is. The students are also acting as proxy. One student who has not come, other student who has come, this student is acting as the proxy of this student. So this is proxy. Here we are not talking about forward proxy or reverse proxy. We are only talking about proxy. Similar thing is done in, if you go to the LLD design patterns playlist, you will see there is one proxy pattern also. That also does the same thing. Somebody else acting on somebody else's behalf is called proxy. Okay. So that's what proxy is. And the technical definition goes like, a proxy server acts as an intermediary between a client and a server. Okay. So a proxy server acts as an intermediary between a client and a server. And why? It facilitates requests and responses. It facilitates requests and responses. So there are two main types of proxies, forward proxy and reverse proxy. Both serve distinct purposes and we will discuss those purposes now. So let's start with forward proxy. What is forward proxy? A forward proxy sits between a client and the server. It forwards client requests to the internet and returns the responses to the client. So forward proxies are commonly used for content filtering, privacy and bypassing geo restrictions. As I mentioned, your office network, your VPNs, right? A company might use a forward proxy to allow employees to access the internet while filtering out inappropriate content. Okay, so this was all about forward proxy, like the definition and example. Let's see how forward proxy works. How forward proxy works. So the client sends a request for a web page to the forward proxy. So this is the client, this is the web, right? So the client will send the request to the proxy. Okay, the forward proxy examines the request. It will check, examines the request, and if it's allowed, means if the site, the URL that the client has entered, it's not in the restricted list, then only the proxy forwards it to the target server on the behalf of the client. Okay, the server then responds with the requested data, and the client will, the proxy will then serve the data to the client. What is the advantage of this? What are the advantages associated with forward proxy? First is anonymity. Anonymity. So it masks the client's IP address. As I told you, it does not let other people know who the client actually is, who is making the request. Next is access control. Again, the client is not allowed to access certain sites, means forward proxy is controlling the access, right? That's why it allows organizations to restrict access to certain websites. Next is caching. It can cache frequently accessed data, reducing bandwidth usage and improving speed. So if something is frequently fetched, like the URL is not in the restricted list and it's frequently fetched maybe from an organization, then maybe when you are logging in, some home page gets displayed in your browser. So that can be served from the cache. Okay. And next is bypassing restrictions. Bypassing restrictions. That's the same as the VPNs. So it enables users to access geo-restricted content. And then what are the challenges associated with this? First is performance overhead. Performance overhead. So it can introduce latency because all your requests are going through the proxy. So a latency will be introduced because the latency is directly proportional to the number of hops your request is making. And if your request could go directly from here to multiple servers and then to the actual server, and if one more proxy is introduced which has to do a lot of processing, there will be latency, right? Performance overhead. Next is security risks. Security risks. So if the proxy is not properly secured, a forward proxy can be vulnerable to attacks. So we need to take care of the security of proxy as well. And configuration complexity. It requires a careful configuration to balance security and usability. So it should not be like that it's going to block all your requests, right? So depending on which requests are useful, which are not, it should block or allow accordingly. Next, let's move to reverse proxy. So a reverse proxy sits between again the internet and the web server. It forwards client requests to the appropriate backend server and then sends the server's response back to client. So again the same thing. This is the web. This proxy is now for the not the web, actually the server. Multiple servers are there, so this sits between them. This is reverse proxy. Reverse proxies are used for load balancing, security, and caching. So don't assume that load balancing can only be done using reverse proxies. No. Uh, Load balancing is one another feature which can be provided by reverse proxies, right? But load balancing can be done independently also. It depends on the use case. If it's required that we need a lot of things other than load balancing, then we can use reverse proxy. But if we need only load balancing, then we can use just load balancing. So for example, a large e-commerce site might use a reverse proxy to distribute incoming traffic across multiple servers, ensuring reliability and fast response times. Okay. Now, how a reverse proxy works. How reverse proxy works. So a client sends a request to the web service. Again, this is the client. This sends the request to the web service. The reverse proxy receives the request and forwards it to one of the servers. Let's say this proxy received it and forwarded it to, let's say, this server. The backend server processes the request and sends the response back to the reverse proxy. It will send the response back to proxy, and then the proxy will send the response back to the client. So the client will never know who served the request, who served its request, which server was it. It will only know that, okay, the request was served and it was served by the proxy server. So what are the advantages of using reverse proxy? First, as we noticed, load balancing. Second, security. So it hides the IP address of the backend servers, thus reducing the risk of attacks. It can also terminate SSL connections, offloading the processing from backend servers. Next is caching. It stores copies of frequently requested resources, reducing load on backend servers and speeding up responses. And then SSL termination. It handles SSL encryption decryption, reducing the burden on backend servers. And then what are the challenges associated with this reverse proxy? So first is single point of failure. If the reverse proxy goes down, it can bring down access to all the backend servers because it's a single point of failure. Next is complexity. Implementing and managing reverse proxies can be complex, especially in large scale environments. And latency. Again, the similar reason for the forward proxy introduces additional latency if not configured properly, especially under heavy loads. So now that we know exactly what's the difference between these two, if we have to list them down, the comparisons between, let's say, forward proxy and reverse proxy. So using according to purpose. So forward proxy is primarily used by clients to access internet resources. Used by clients to access internet resources. And reverse proxy is primarily used by servers to manage and optimize client resources. Next is location in network where each is present. It sits between client and internet. Client and internet. And this one sits between internet and servers. Use cases, if you see, so for this it's anonymity, mostly anonymity, geo bypassing, right? And for this it is mostly load balancing security, SSL termination, right? Now, in terms of scalability, it primarily helps scale client side access to resources. It helps to scale client side access. Hmm? And it helps scale server side resources. Server side resources. Okay. Now, security. Forward proxy provides security mainly for client. Again, client security, and this one server security. We discussed this. So this is actually the fundamental difference between these forward proxy and reverse proxy. So in short, forward proxies are meant to serve the client, save the client, and reverse proxies are meant to serve the servers, save the servers, and do a lot of things for the servers. Okay, so forward proxy forwards the request, reverse proxy reverses the request order. Instead of server serving, it looks like the proxy is serving. So yeah, I wish I could talk about the use cases or the real world examples, but I have done that in the beginning in great detail. So I hope that gives you a good idea of how proxies work and what's the role of reverse proxy and forward proxy in this. So that's all there was in this video. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I will see you in the next one.